Picture the second greatest port on Earth. Now fill it with human beings packed so tightly into stone courtyards that they share one toilet between 40 people. Add the smell of a river carrying everything a city of 400,000 produces. Add coal smoke thick enough to leave black prints on a white handkerchief after a single morning outside. Add the sound of ships' foghorns pulling through fog so dense it turns gaslights into orange smears and men into shadows. That's Liverpool, 1873, gateway to the British Empire, the city where cotton comes in from America, tobacco comes in from Virginia, emigrants go out to Australia and Canada, and anywhere that isn't here. The second busiest port in the world, wealthier than most cities, grander than most cities, and containing, inside its cotton merchant mansions and its classical public buildings, some of the worst human housing conditions anywhere in the industrialised world. We're going back there tonight. Not as tourists looking at the Albert Dock or the Mersey. We're living it. 1 week, 1 court, everything you would have seen, smelled, touched, and somehow survived. I make these history stories, and honestly, I've no idea if anyone actually sleeps to them, or if you're all just strange people who like hearing about 19th century sewage arrangements at 2 in the morning. Either way, get comfortable. Here we go. The rain started on Sunday. You know this because the court is still wet when you wake on Monday, and it's been wet in a particular way. That deep, settled wet that tells you the stones didn't just get rained on. They got soaked through. The rain found every crack and groove and filled them all, and now the whole courtyard smells like old stone and standing water, and the particular sour odour of mud that hasn't dried in days. You're lying on a mattress that isn't yours. It's not exactly the Donovan's either. It belongs to no one specific, which is how a lot of things work in Jordan's court. The mattress is stuffed with flocking, shredded wool and cotton waste, and it compresses under your weight into something that's barely a 1/4 inch thick in the places where you sleep. Where Paddy sleeps, it's almost flat. He's been here 3 years longer than you. The ceiling above you is maybe 8 feet up. The walls are close. The whole room is 12 feet by 10 feet, and right now there are 5 people in it. You, Paddy Donovan, his wife Mary, and their 3 children, the youngest of whom is still asleep against Mary's back with one arm thrown up for her head, in the way that children sleep when they don't yet know enough to be afraid of what tomorrow holds. Her name is Nora. She's 4 years old. There's a window in the far wall, but it faces the inner courtyard, not the street, and the buildings opposite are so close that even on a good day, the light that comes through is dim and grey and slightly yellow. Right now, with the clouds stacked up outside, it's barely enough to see by. You can hear the rain. Not on glass. The window doesn't have glass, or rather it has glass in about 2/3 of its panes, and the rest is stuffed with rags and a piece of board. The rain hits the board with a flat, papery sound. It hits the courtyard stones below with a constant hiss. It drips somewhere inside the room from a crack in the plaster near the chimney, landing in a tin cup that Paddy positioned there exactly for this purpose. Tick, tick, tick. You've been awake for 10 minutes already, listening to that. You need to be at the dock gates by 6. This is the part of life in Liverpool that nobody who hasn't lived it quite understands. You don't have a job. What you have is the possibility of a job, which you have to go and collect every single morning, standing in a crowd of other men outside the dock gates and waiting for a foreman to look at you and decide whether today you get work or whether you go home empty. They call it the shape-up, or sometimes just the call. The foreman comes out at 6, sometimes 5 past, sometimes 1/4 past, if he's in a mood. He looks at the crowd and he picks men. Sometimes he has tokens, small brass or lead discs stamped with the dock company's mark, and he throws them into the crowd, and whoever catches one gets work. If you don't catch one, you don't work. You don't get the token, you don't get paid. You don't get paid, you don't eat. This is not a complicated system. You sit up in the dark and feel around for your boots. They're where you left them, under the head of the mattress, cold and damp. The leather has that stiffness that means they've been wet and dried badly, curling at the toes, the stitching along the left sole starting to open at the heel. You put them on anyway. You lace them as tight as you can, which helps with the loose sole a little but not much. When the streets are wet, and right now every street in Liverpool is wet, that gap in the stitching will let water in within the first 100 yards. Paddy's already up. You can hear him by the fireplace doing something with the grate. "Any coal?" you whisper. "Half a bucket." His voice is the particular quiet of a man who has children sleeping nearby and knows exactly how much noise is too much. Enough to boil water, nothing more. Half a bucket means there's no heat for the morning. Half a bucket means you're going out into the October dark in damp boots and a coat that's mostly dry except for the collar, where you fell asleep before it finished drying last night. You stand up and pull on the coat. Your body feels like it was assembled from parts that don't quite fit. Shoulders that ache from Saturday's work on the grain boats. Hands that are still raw across the knuckles from the rope. Burns you got on Wednesday. A blister on your right heel that opened Thursday, and is now in that unpleasant stage where it's not quite healed and not quite infected, but makes itself known with every step. You're 17 years old, and your body is already keeping score. The courtyard is a kind of shock, even now. Even after 6 months of this, even knowing exactly what you're going to see when you pull back the door and step out onto the wet flags, it's still a shock. Not always a dramatic one. Sometimes it's just the small, repetitive shock of, this is real. This is where I live. This is the ground I stand on. Jordan's Court is accessed from Vauxhall Road through an entry so narrow that 2 people can't pass each other without turning sideways. The entry is maybe 12 feet long, a tunnel between 2 buildings, and the walls on either side are black with damp and what you've decided not to examine too closely. Bits of vegetable matter. A smear of something at hip height that's been there since you arrived and probably longer. The court itself is roughly square, perhaps 30 feet across. Flagstones, most of them cracked, none of them level. Buildings on 3 sides, 2 stories each, back to back with the houses facing the street so that the rooms inside get no direct sunlight on one side of the year and barely any on the other. The windows are dark at this hour, except for a light in the corner room on the first floor where old Bridget Higati always has a candle going before anyone else is awake, which means she was either up very early or never went to sleep at all, which is also possible. In the centre of the court, the pump. It's a simple iron hand pump, mounted on a wooden post with a stone trough beneath it. This pump supplies water to everyone in Jordan's Court and to the court immediately behind, which connects through another passage and which contains about the same number of people. Roughly 80 people share this pump. The pump doesn't work every day. Some days the pressure is good and the water runs clear. Some days it runs slow and slightly brown. Some days it doesn't run at all. And then you have to carry buckets from the standpipe on Vauxhall Road, which means queuing behind women who've had the same idea. And on a wet Monday morning that means standing in the rain for however long it takes. You try the pump now. The handle is cold enough to sting your palms through the already cracked skin. You work it up and down. It takes 3 full strokes before anything comes, and then water stutters out into the trough, pale brownish grey in the pre-dawn dark. You cup your hands under it, splash your face. The cold is violent. The kind of cold that doesn't just wake you up but makes your body flinch back. A full body recoil from the temperature, the way you'd pull your hand back from something hot. But in reverse. And you do it again anyway, because this is the wash you're getting. There's no hot water in Jordan's court at 6 in the morning. There is no bathroom. There is no indoor plumbing of any kind. Across the court, in the far corner, there's a wooden structure about the size of a large wardrobe. It's the privy. One privy for the entire court backed up against the rear wall, and it has been, you know from Paddy, who knows from the previous tenants, consistently overflowing for most of the last year. The overflow runs across the stones of the court toward the drain in the centre, and when it rains like this, the drain backs up, and the water that pools in the low corner of the courtyard is not entirely rainwater. This is what you walk across every morning. The smell hits you now, the full morning version of it. Rain has a way of releasing it. It activates whatever is sitting in the stones, whatever has seeped into the ground over years and decades of this. You get the sewage first, that low, meaty, sweet note underneath everything else. Then the coal smoke, thin and grey, already starting to build as people in the surrounding buildings light their fires. Then something animal. A dead rat in the entry last week, probably still there, probably still adding its contribution, and underneath all of it, threading through everything like a ground base, the Mersey, the river, the smell of a great industrial waterway on a wet morning, salt and mud and something chemical, from the tanneries up at Vauxhall and the chemical works at Bootle, the whole industrial apparatus of a port city doing its business in the water and sending the evidence upstream. Liverpool smells like commerce and decay at the same time. This is both a metaphor and a literal statement. Paddy catches up with you at the entry. He's pulling on his jacket as he walks, the jacket that has been mended at both elbows and the left shoulder, and still isn't quite right. He's a big man, Paddy Donovan, broad through the chest, hands that look like they were made for a larger species. He came from County Mayo in 1866, the year after a bad harvest, and before that his father came from Connaught during the famine. So Paddy carries a couple of generations of reasons to leave Ireland in his bones, and it shows sometimes in the set of his jaw and the way he looks at things. Rain's not stopping, he says, not as a complaint, just as information. No. Flannery's Gate or the North Dock? Flannery's Gate is closer. The North Dock has more work, usually, but it means 20 minutes in the rain, and arriving already cold and wet, which affects your chances because foremen at the call will look for a man who seems healthy and capable, and a man who's standing there soaked through and shivering looks neither. Flannery's, you say. Paddy nods. He's already pulled his cap down low against the rain that's just starting again. A thin, persistent drizzle that isn't quite heavy enough to run off the brim of your cap, but is exactly heavy enough to soak through your coat in about 20 minutes. The streets of Vauxhall are already moving. This surprises people who imagine the poor as sleeping late. The opposite is true. The working poor are up before anyone because they have to be. The women going to the washhouses, the children going to fetch water, the men heading to whatever gate or factory or market might offer a day's work if they get there soon enough. You pass a group of women carrying bundles of washing toward the public wash house on Nash Grove. Their breath steams. One of them has a baby strapped to her chest under her shawl, and the baby's face is just visible, cheeks red with cold, eyes wide and dark. She's walking fast. She has to be there when it opens, or she loses her place in the queue, and if she loses her place she doesn't get done, and if she doesn't get done there's no clean linen, and without clean linen there's no money from the household in Abercrombie Square that hired her to do this, and without that money there's nothing for Monday's dinner. Everyone in Liverpool is running calculations like this all the time, not because they're mathematical, because they have to be. Flannery's Gate opens at 6 sharp. There are already 40 men waiting when you arrive, standing in the rain with their coats pulled up around their ears, shuffling their feet, watching the gate. They don't talk much. In the early morning, with everything at stake, there's not a lot of conversation. You know some of them. Connolly, who works the grain boats and has 4 arms like dock rope, and a face that looks like it's been weathered by actual weather. Old Murphy, who came over in 1848 and has been on these docks ever since, and who the foremen know by name, which is either a good sign or a bad one depending on the day. A young Welshman named Davies who arrived the same month you did, who you sometimes see on the street and nod to, the way you'd nod to a reflection. You don't look like each other. You don't come from the same valley, don't speak the same dialect of Welsh. But you're both 17, both here because home ran out of options, both standing in the October rain at 5:45 wondering if today is a working day or a hungry one. Davies catches your eye now. He shakes his head slightly. His expression says, I have no idea either. At 6:05 the gate swings open. The foreman is a man named Regan, heavy set, red in the face, wearing a coat that actually fits him, which marks him out from everyone else in the crowd. He holds a clipboard. He looks at the assembled men with the expression of someone selecting produce at a market, appraising, slightly bored, always aware that the selection is partly arbitrary, but that the power to select is the important thing, and it must be maintained. Right, he says, 8 men for grain, 8 men for timber, 6 for general cargo on the Indefatigable. 22 positions, 40 men. You do the arithmetic the way everyone does the arithmetic, instantly without needing to think about it. He starts picking. You watch his eyes. You try to look capable. You try to look like a man who has done this before and will do it without complaint and will work through the shift without slowing down. These are the qualities that get you picked. Youth helps sometimes. Younger men are stronger, usually. But experience helps more, and the men who have been here longer than you tend to get the nod first. He picks Connolly. He picks 3 Irish brothers whose name you've never learned. He picks old Murphy, who catches the nod with the calm of a man who expected it. He picks Davies, which surprises you, and Davies's expression of relief is so naked and open that you almost look away. He doesn't pick you. It happens in about 30 seconds. One moment, 40 men. Next moment, 22 walking through the gate and 18 standing in the rain watching them go. You are one of the 18. Regan looks at the remainder with the practiced disinterest of someone who has delivered this particular rejection many hundreds of times. Tomorrow, he says, which is what he always says, which means nothing in particular except that tomorrow the gate will open again and you can come back and try again. He goes back through the gate. The gate closes. The remaining men stand there for a moment in the rain, that specific communal moment of, all right then, and then they drift apart. A few will try the other gates. A few will give up and go home. One very old man sits down on a stone bollard and takes out a clay pipe. and lights it with the patience of someone who's been doing this long enough to have run out of feelings about it. You try the north dock. The walk takes 25 minutes in the rain, and you arrive soaked through from the collar down, and the foreman at the north dock takes one look at you and picks the men he was already going to pick, and you are not among them. By 8 o'clock, you're walking back to Jordan's Court with nothing to show for 3 hours of cold and wet, except for a blister that has definitely opened now and is leaking into your boot. The court is different in daylight, or what passes for daylight in Liverpool in October, which is a uniform grey brightness that falls from clouds so total and complete that there are no shadows, only gradations of dim. It makes everything look faintly unreal. The wet flagstones reflect the sky. The buildings have the same grey-brown of the clouds above them, but the court is alive. The children are out, 4 of them, belonging to various rooms in the buildings, playing something near the pump that involves splashing through the puddles and screaming. The smallest one, maybe 2 years old, belongs to the Callahan family on the ground floor, is sitting in a puddle apparently by choice, completely soaked, with an expression of deep personal satisfaction. Old Bridget is sitting in the doorway of her room with her hands in her lap watching. She does this every day, rain or no rain. She's perhaps 70, perhaps 80. She doesn't know herself, she says, and finds the question funny rather than alarming. She came from Cork in 1847 and has lived in various courts in the Vauxhall area ever since, which means she has been in Liverpool for 26 years and has probably outlived everyone who came with her. No work, she says, is not a question. No work. Flannery's and the North. She makes a sound in her throat, not quite sympathetic, more like, yes, this is how it is, this is how it was, this is how it will be. There's a ship in from Hamburg tomorrow, she says. General cargo. That usually means work at the south. Try there first. You don't ask how she knows this. Old Bridget knows things about the docks that foremen don't know. She has a network of information that runs through the court and outward, through every washing line and doorway conversation in the Vauxhall area, and it is more reliable than the shipping notices posted at the dock board offices on Water Street. Thank you, you say. She nods, goes back to watching the children splash. You go inside to see if there's anything left from last night. There isn't. There's half a loaf of bread, which is yesterday's bread, which means it's hard enough at the crust to require real effort. There's a scraping of dripping in the bowl on the shelf. There's a heel of cheese that Mary saved back, wrapped in a cloth. The cheese is for the children. You eat some bread with the dripping and stand by the window watching the rain fall on the court. Outside, one of the children has discovered that if you run at the puddle by the drain and jump with both feet, you can achieve a very satisfying splash. He does this repeatedly. He does not seem to mind the cold. You mind the cold. You're cold in a way that is less about temperature than about the wet that has gotten into everything. Your collar, your socks, the space between your shoulder blades where the coat doesn't quite cover. Cold that has gotten into your joints, into the ache in your shoulders. Cold that has crept into your stomach and replaced the hunger with something more complicated. You should go out again. You should try another gate, or see if there's work in the unloading yards, or find if any of the coal merchants need casual labour today. There are always possibilities. Liverpool is always moving things from one place to another, always needing hands to do the moving. But the bread sits in your stomach, and the fire is not lit, and the rain is still falling, and for this 1 hour you stay in and let the warmth that remains from last night's fire, almost nothing, the ghost of warmth, the memory of warmth in the stones, let that hold you. Your hands are on the window sill. The wood is grained and rough under your palms, worn smooth in the middle where hands have rested before, rough at the edges where nobody touches. You run your thumb along the grain. Someone lived here before you, before the Donovans, before whoever was before the Donovans. This room has been absorbing Liverpool winters for 40 years, 50 years, longer. The walls have soaked up everything. By mid-morning the rain has steadied into something purposeful, not a storm, worse than a storm in its way. A storm is dramatic and loud, and then it ends. This is a grey, patient, determined rain that has decided it's simply what sky does now, and is making no promises about stopping. The court is changing. The drain in the centre, always inadequate, always half-blocked with the debris of 40 families, is no longer drained. The water is pooling. First just around the drain, a circle of standing water, then wider. Then the low corner of the court, where the flags have sunk slightly over the years, starts to fill. Children are pulled inside. The old woman across from old Bridget, Mrs. Kearney, comes out in a canvas apron and sweeps at the puddle futilely, pushing water with a broom the way you might try to push fog. She sweeps and the water moves 3 inches and flows back. She looks up and sees you watching from the window. "That drain needs rodding," she says, as if this is news, as if the drain has not needed rodding since before you arrived. "I know," you say. "This court will be flooded by afternoon if this keeps on." "I know. Someone should speak to the sanitary inspector." This is what people say when there's nothing else to say. Someone should speak to the sanitary inspector. The sanitary inspector for this district is a man named Forsyth, who you have seen once, in the street from a distance. He wears a coat that marks him as a professional man. He carries papers. He's responsible for the sanitary conditions of approximately 8,000 people in this district and has been, by all accounts, carrying out this responsibility with what might charitably be described as measured pacing. The last time anyone from Jordan's Court spoke to the sanitary inspector was in August, when there was a bad week for the privy. He came, he looked, he wrote in his notebook, he said he would file a report with the vestry. The privy continued to overflow. "I'll see if I can find him," you say, which is something to say. Mrs. Kearney looks at you with the expression of someone who has been told this particular thing before and knows what it means. She goes back inside. You go to the pawnbroker on Monday, not because you want to, because that is what Monday is for, in Jordan's Court and in every court like it in the Vauxhall district and the Scotland Road district and everywhere, that working people in Liverpool are trying to stretch wages that arrive on Friday to last through the following Friday. The system works like this. On Sunday, you wear your best clothes to church, or rather, the family has one set of decent clothes between them. A decent coat, a pair of good boots, a dress, whatever the household has managed to acquire. And on Sunday, those clothes come out and the family goes to Mass looking like people who are, if not comfortable, at least not obviously destitute. On Monday morning, before the pawnbroker closes, those clothes go in. You get maybe 3 or 4 shillings on them. That money buys food for Monday and Tuesday. By Thursday or Friday, when wages come in, if wages come in, you go back, pay the principal plus interest and retrieve the clothes in time for Sunday. If wages don't come in, the clothes stay in. If that happens enough times, you can't redeem them, and the pawnbroker eventually sells them, and you have no Sunday clothes, and you don't go to church looking like a person. The pawnbroker's name is Hanson. His shop is on Vauxhall Road, 3 doors down from the corner, identifiable by the 3 brass balls above the door and by the queue that forms outside it on Monday mornings. Hanson is a small, neat man with a face that gives nothing away and hands that move very quickly when he's examining items, turning things over, checking for marks, feeling the weight, making the assessment, all in about 5 seconds. You're not bringing clothes today. You have nothing left to bring. What you have is a pocket watch. It was your grandfather's. It doesn't work. The mechanism jammed sometime in the last 10 years, and nobody's been able to fix it. The case is silver, or silver-plated more likely, but it looks like silver, which is what matters for this transaction. You hand it over. Hanson turns it in his fingers, opens the case, closes it, holds it to the light from the window. 2 shillings, he says. It's silver. It's plated, he says without looking up. 2 shillings. 2 and 6. He looks at you now. His eyes do a rapid calculation that has nothing to do with the watch and everything to do with you. Your boots, your coat, the state of your hands, how badly you need this. 2 and 3p, he says. That's my final. 2 shillings and 3p. That's more than 2 shillings. It's also the last thing you have that belonged to your grandfather. It's the last thing you have that isn't purely functional. You put it on the counter. He puts down the money. You leave. Outside, the rain is heavier now. You stand for a moment under the awning of the shop next door, a chandler, rope hanging in coils, the sweet sharp smell of pine tar, and count the coins in your palm. 2 shillings. 3 pennies. In your other pocket you have 4p halfpenny from last Thursday. Total 2 shillings and 7p halfpenny. This needs to cover food for today and tomorrow at minimum. Bread costs 3 halfpence a loaf if you buy the 2nd grade from the baker on Eldon Street. A £1/2 of dripping 4p. A pennyworth of coal, which is barely enough, but it's something. A halfpenny scraping of tea from Mrs. Finley's, who sells it loose by the pinch. The children need milk. A pint of milk is 2p. You work the arithmetic in your head. You come up about 4p short, which means no milk today, which means Nora gets watered-down tea sweetened with a scraping of the sugar in the twist of paper that Mary keeps on the shelf. Nora is 4 years old. You walk to the baker's. The queue at Eldon Street is long, because the baker opens at 9 and it's now 1/4 and everyone who had the same idea as you, which is most of the Vauxhall district, has been here for 15 minutes already. The rain falls on all of you equally. The man in front of you is wearing a coat that's been repaired so many times that the repairs are older than the original fabric. He's holding a cloth bag. He smells of fish, either because he works the fish market or because fish has gotten into everything he owns. He shifts his weight from foot to foot with the particular patience of someone who has been in queues his entire life and knows that urgency changes nothing about how fast a queue moves. Behind you is a woman with a baby on her hip who is explaining quietly and without apparent distress to the baby that bread is coming and the baby should stop crying, which the baby is not doing. The queue moves. You move with it. This is a significant portion of a working day in 1870s Liverpool, standing in queues, water queue, bread queue, coal queue on bad weeks, the workhouse queue if things go really wrong, which you have not yet done and are working very hard not to do. The workhouse is at Brownlow Hill, behind the great cathedral they're still building up on the ridge. You've seen it from a distance. The main building is enormous, almost civic in its scale, if civic is a word that can be applied to a building that people enter in desperation and leave either dead or broken. The workhouse can hold over 5,000 people. You have been told this as though it's reassuring, as though the capacity of a place you're terrified of is somehow comforting. Liverpool has a lot of capacity for misery. You get your bread, you get your dripping, you get a pennyworth of coal and the twist of tea, no milk. Walking back to the court, bread under your arm, you pass a woman outside a court entrance you don't know, sitting on the step in the rain with a child across her lap. The child is maybe 7 and is not moving, and the woman is looking at nothing specific, at a middle distance that isn't the wall opposite and isn't the street and isn't anything you can see. You walk past. You do this because there is nothing else to do. You have 2 shillings and a penny halfpenny left and a family of 5 depending on what's under your arm, and the woman on the step is in her own particular crisis that you don't have the means to enter. Liverpool is full of people in crises that you don't have the means to enter. You learn this fast. You learn to walk past. You don't learn to not notice. Tuesday, the rain gets serious. You're at the South Dock Gate by 5:30, which means leaving the court in the dark, which means navigating Vauxhall Road by the light of the gas lamps, which cast their orange circles at intervals and leave everything in between as shadow. Old Bridget was right. A Hamburg ship came in overnight. You can see its masts above the dock wall when you arrive. The red and black of the funnel just visible against the first pale grey of the eastern sky. There are boxes on the quayside already, and men working, and the foreman at the south gate is a man named Gaffney, who you've worked for before and who, crucially, has seen you work before. He picks you. The token is cold in your hand. Lead, not brass, stamped with the dock company mark. Small enough to lose in your coat pocket, which has happened before and does not bear thinking about. The work is unloading crates from the Hamburg ship. This is what dock work is. You go down into the hold and you lift things and you carry them and you stack them and then you lift more things. The crates today contain manufactured goods, clockwork mechanisms, glass instruments, optical equipment, the kind of goods that require care because if you drop them there's a problem, which means you carry them more slowly, which means you carry fewer of them, which means the work takes longer and your back suffers more. The hold of a ship smells like its cargo first and the ship second. The glass and clockwork ship smells of oil and machine, lubricant and sawdust from the packing cases. It smells of Hamburg, though you've never been there and wouldn't know what Hamburg smells like if it stood right in front of you. It smells of the inside of crates that have been sealed for 2 weeks crossing the North Sea. And underneath that, the ship itself, salt, tar, bilge water, the particular ancient wet smell of oak and iron that's been at sea. Ships smell like they've been somewhere. They carry their journeys in their planks. The foreman watching the loading is a Scotsman named McAllister, who says very little but has a way of communicating displeasure through the angle of his cap that you learn to read on your second day. Cap straight, acceptable. Cap pushed back, watching carefully. Cap tilted left. Someone is about to get a warning. Cap is straight this morning, which means things are going well. You work from 6 until noon with one break at 9. The break is 20 minutes. You eat the bread you brought, one of Mary's rolls, small, dense, slightly underbaked because the fire runs low before the bread is done and the oven doesn't hold heat well. And you drink water from a bucket that one of the dockers filled from a standpipe on the quayside. The water tastes of the Mersey. Everything near the docks tastes of the Mersey. You work the afternoon until 5. By the time the whistle goes, your shoulders are doing something complex and unpleasant, and the blister on your heel has graduated from uncomfortable to properly painful, and your hands, already cracked from the rope work last week, have acquired 2 new raw spots where the crate handles have been. But you have a full day's pay, 2 shillings and 4pence for the day, a docker's rate, not the best rate. The skilled men, the crane operators, the foremen, they earn more, but for unloading, 2 shillings and 4pence is the standard, and it's yours. You hold the coins in your hand for a moment before putting them away. 2 shillings and 4pence for 9 hours of lifting things and carrying them. That's less than a well-dressed man in the Abercrombie Square district would pay for a single evening's entertainment. For a good seat at the theatre, perhaps. For a bottle of decent wine with dinner. You don't spend much time thinking like this usually, but on some days it sits there in your hand, the gap between what this work costs and what it pays. You put the coins away and walk home through the rain. Connolly catches up with you on Vauxhall Road. He's tall, Connolly. Taller than you, which is saying something. You're not small. And broad across the shoulders in the way that men get after years of dock work. That particular broadness that comes not from deliberate exercise but from doing the same heavy motion every day, until the muscles grow to meet the requirement. He's from Clare. He's been in Liverpool 11 years. He has a wife and 2 children in rooms on Scotland Road, which is a step up from Jordan's Court, he'll tell you without quite bragging about it. Southgate tomorrow, he says, falling in beside you. Same ship? Different. American this time, cotton bale from New York. He glances sideways at you. You held up all right today. My shoulders don't think so. Your shoulders will adjust. He says this as though it's settled fact, which it probably is. When I started, I couldn't lift my arms above me head on day 3. You learn to work through it. How long until you don't feel it? Connolly thinks about this with genuine seriousness, as if it's a real question that deserves a real answer. 4 years, he says. About 4 years before the work stops telling your body about it. 4 years. And after that? After that, he says, you feel different things, older things. He's quiet for a moment. The knees go first, then the back. Murphy. Old Murphy at Flannery's. He's been on these docks 30 years. He can barely straighten his back on cold mornings. You walk in silence for a bit. The rain has eased slightly, to the kind that isn't quite rain anymore. More a fine wet mist that hangs in the air and settles on your coat, and turns your face damp without giving you the satisfaction of being properly rained on. You've thought about going elsewhere, you ask. Everywhere else is the same, Connolly says. Work and weather and wanting more than you've got. At least here I know the streets. That's something, knowing the streets. You know Jordan's Court now. You know which flagstone rocks underfoot and which is solid. You know that the pump runs better in the morning than the afternoon, and that if you wait until the evening crowd has finished at the privy, the smell is almost manageable on dry days. You know that old Bridget's light in the window means everything is normal, and its absence means something has happened. You know the shape of the buildings against the sky on Vauxhall Road, and the smell of the particular bakery, and the sound of the church on Eldon Street when it rings the half hour. These are small knowledges, but they're yours. Southgate at 5:30, you say. 5:30, Connolly agrees and turns off towards Scotland Road, pulling his cap down against the mist. Wednesday arrives with more rain, and a problem. The problem announces itself early. You hear it before you're fully awake. A sound that doesn't belong. A sound that your sleeping brain tries to fit into dreams and can't. So it pulls you up through the layers of sleep into the particular alertness of, that's wrong. What is that? It's water. Not rain on the board in the window. Not the drip into Paddy's tin cup. Water moving across stone. Water in the room. You sit up. In the dark you can feel it. The mattress which was on the floor has shifted slightly. The floor is wet. Not just damp. Wet. The kind of wet that means there's standing water across the flagstones, a film of it, moving slightly as you move. Paddy. I know. He's already awake. Already standing. You can hear him in the dark, his feet in the water moving toward the fireplace. It's the court. The drain's gone completely. You stand up. The water is cold enough to make you catch your breath. It's maybe half an inch deep, no more, but it's across the entire floor and it's coming in under the door, a slow, continuous seep from the courtyard where the situation has apparently deteriorated overnight. The children are awake now. You can hear Nora starting to cry. That particular cry that means cold, that means something is wrong, and the wrongness is physical. Mary has her up. Hush, hush, come here, hush. There's dry wood on the shelf, you say. If I can get the fire going. The wood'll be wet by now, Paddy says. He strikes a match. In the brief flare you can see the water shining on the floor, see the 3 children pressed against the wall on the bed frame where Mary has put them, see the dark line at the bottom of the door where water is coming through. He lights the candle. In the candlelight, the room looks like a scene from something biblical. The water on the flagstones reflecting the flame. The children's faces pale and serious above the blanket Mary has pulled around them. Right, Paddy says. Thomas, go see what the court looks like. The court's a lake, or not quite a lake. It's perhaps 2 inches deep at the lowest point, but it's continuous water from the entry to the far wall, with the flagstones just visible beneath it like the bottom of a shallow pond. The privy in the corner has its door standing open and a dark stain spreading from its base that you make the decision not to look at closely. The pump stands in its trough with water around its base. The sky above is still the same grey it's been since Sunday. Clouds so thick and so many of them that there's no question of weather changing, only of how bad this particular iteration of the same weather is going to get. 3 doors are open around the court. In each one, a face looking out, assessing, making the same calculations you're making. Old Bridget's doorway. Bridget herself in a black shawl looking at the court with an expression that mixes alarm with the specific exasperation of someone who knew this was going to happen. The Callahan room. Mrs. Callahan, who is a large woman in her 30s, standing with her hands on her hips, and across the court in the corner room on the ground floor, a family you don't know well, recently arrived, name of Brennan, with several children visible behind the woman in the doorway, all of them looking at the water. The entry's flooded too, Mrs. Callahan says. I just checked. It's a foot deep in the passageway. You can't get out without wading. Can you get out? If you don't mind wet to the knee. You look at the entry. The passage between the buildings that leads to Vauxhall Road, 12 feet long, narrower than your arm span. If the court has 2 inches of water and the passage is a foot deep, then either it's draining away from the court into the passage, or the passage is backing up and sending water into the court. You wade to the entry. The water in the passage rises as you enter it, cold against your shins. cold enough to make your legs feel like the bones have been replaced with iron. At the deepest point, it's almost to your knee. This is the drain outside on Vauxhall Road, blocked, backing everything up. The street outside is visible at the end of the passage, a strip of grey morning. There are other people out there. You can see feet passing. Normal people going about their morning on a street that is somehow incomprehensibly not a lake. You wade through. On Vauxhall Road you can see the problem. The gutter is full. The drain cover 20 yards up the road has been overwhelmed and is sitting in the middle of a shallow river running down the camber of the street. 3 carts have stopped because the horses don't want to go through the deepest bit. Men are arguing about the routing. You go back through the passage and stand in the court. This requires solving in some order. The children can't stay in a room with water on the floor all day. The fire can't be lit with wet wood. The bread you bought yesterday is on the floor shelf and may already have gotten wet. The mattresses will need to be raised. You have to be at the South Dock gate in 1 hour. Paddy solves the immediate problem with the efficiency of a man who has handled emergencies before. The bed frame goes on 2 upended buckets. The children go on the bed frame. The mattresses go onto the table. Mary ties her skirts up around her knees and moves through the water without complaint, redistributing everything that can be raised. There's a rhythm to it. Pass this, take that, up here, here, and within 20 minutes the room has been reorganised around the water rather than the water having been removed, but the reorganisation is good enough. The bread is fine. It was on the second shelf. Go, Paddy says, when you've done what you can. We'll handle the rest. Go get work. The entry? I know the entry. I'll sort it. He looks at you with the particular look of a man who's been solving similar problems for most of his adult life and finds them tiring but not unexpected. Go. You go. You wade through the entry. The water is now slightly higher than when you went through before, which means it's still rising, and out onto Vauxhall Road. Your boots, already not quite waterproof, are immediately fully wet. The water has gone through the open seam at the heel and through the thin spots at the sole, and your socks are soaking, which means you'll be working today with wet feet. Which means by this evening your feet will be in a particular condition that takes about a week to properly recover from. You start walking toward the South Dock. Behind you, the door to Jordan's Court. The sign above the entry, a painted board that says Jordan's Court, in letters that used to be black but are now mostly grey, is receiving the morning's rain with the patience of old wood that has received many mornings' rain and expects many more. The Hamburg ship is gone, but Connolly was right about the American cotton bales. The SS Atlanta has been at the quay since 2 a.m, and the bales are being swung off the deck in nets, 4 at a time, and lowered onto the quayside where men like you and Connolly and a dozen others unhook them from the nets and drag them to the warehouse. Cotton bales are approximately £500 each. You do not lift them individually. You roll them, tip them onto the wheeled dollies, push them. But even rolling and pushing £500 requires you to engage every muscle in a way that grain crates do not. Requires you to throw your back into it, to use your legs as the primary engine and your arms as directional tools. Requires a continuous full body effort that by 10 o'clock in the morning has your heart working faster than is comfortable and a constant thin sweat across your back despite the cold. The cotton smells of America. You've never been to America. You know America as the place that takes Liverpool's emigrants. The ships go out full of Irish and Welsh and English families who have decided that wherever America is, it's better than here. and sends back cotton and tobacco and timber, because America has these in abundance. The cotton that comes off the Atlanta is compressed into bales so tight that the fibres at the surface are broken into a fine white dust that gets into your nose and mouth and makes you cough a dry, white cough when you breathe too deeply. By noon you've coughed enough that your throat is raw. Connolly hands you a piece of rag from his pocket, damp and grey, which you tie across your face below the eyes. "Should have told you," he says. "Cotton's worse than grain for the lungs. You get used to breathing through something." He's been breathing through a piece of old flannel that hangs around his neck like a permanent accessory. Does it help? "Slightly," he says, which is an honest answer. You breathe through the rag. It smells of Connolly's pocket and tastes of wet cloth, but the coughing decreases slightly. The work continues. The quayside in the rain smells of salt water and machine oil, and the particular metallic smell of the dock cranes, which are steam-powered and leak steam in small wisps around their joints, even when not in operation. Beyond the quay, the Mersey is grey-brown and moving fast. The rain has swollen it, and there's a current visible in the middle of the river, where the surface has that slightly ridged texture of water being pushed hard. Ships are anchored in the river waiting for a berth. Their lights are on, it being grey enough for lights even at midday. On the far side of the river, Birkenhead is barely visible through the weather. Just the suggestion of buildings, a faint shadow of the other shore. Liverpool lives with the Mersey the way all great port cities live with their water, depending on it, using it, fearing it sometimes, never quite able to separate who you are from what the river made you. Wednesday evening, returning from the docks, you stop. There is a man standing in the entry to Jordan's Court, not standing in a purposeful way, standing in the way of someone who has entered a space and then reconsidered whether entering was the right decision. He's maybe 40, well dressed, not extravagantly, but clearly not from the court. A proper coat, a hat, boots with no visible damage to the soles. He's carrying a bag, a doctor's bag. You know it by the shape of it. Black leather, rectangular. The particular solidity of a bag that has to carry instruments. "Is this Jordan's Court?" he asks when you approach. "It is." "I'm looking for—" He checks a paper in his hand. "Donovan. Paddy Donovan." Your stomach does something. "That's us. I live there. What is it?" The doctor looks at you. His face has the particular carefully neutral expression of a man who delivers bad news professionally. Not cold. Careful. "I'm Dr. Chambers, the dispensary on Eldon Street. There was a report. A woman came this morning. A child who's been feverish." "Nora?" You push past him into the entry, half wading through the water, still sitting there. The level has dropped slightly since the morning, but it hasn't gone, and out into the court. The room door is open. Mary is there, and she looks up when you come in, and her face tells you what the doctor's careful expression was managing not to. Nora is on the bed, which has been put back on the floor now that the water level dropped. She's covered with everything the room contains by way of blankets. Her hair is stuck to her forehead. Her face has the particular flush of fever, that deep, dry red that is different from the red of cold. She's breathing. This is the first thing you check. This is the first thing anyone checks. She's breathing, but the breathing has a sound, a small, papery sound at the end of each breath. Not the normal sound of breath. Something added. Something that shouldn't be there. "How long?" you ask. "Since last night," Mary says. "I thought it was the cold from the floor." I kept thinking it was just the cold. Dr. Chambers enters behind you. He has to duck slightly for the door frame. In the small room he seems larger than he did in the entry. He sets his bag on the table and opens it. He examines Nora with the quick efficiency of a man who examines a great many children in rooms like this one and knows the territory. Hands that are warm, deliberately so. You can see him warming them on his coat before he touches her. He checks her throat, her chest, her ears. He takes her pulse with 2 fingers at her wrist and watches something in his expression that he doesn't share. He stands up. "It's a chest fever," he says. "Not the worst I've seen this week, but it needs watching." Mary makes a sound that isn't quite a word. She needs to be kept warm. She needs fluids, clean fluids, not from the pump if you can help it. She should not be on the floor. The damp. He looks at the wet mark still visible on the flagstones, the tide line on the walls at ankle height. The damp is the enemy here. He reaches into his bag and takes out a small brown bottle. This is a tincture. 3 drops in water twice a day. It won't cure the fever, but it'll ease the coughing. He holds the bottle out to Mary. "How much?" you ask, because you have to ask. He looks at you. Does the same rapid assessment the pawnbroker did, except where the pawnbroker was calculating leverage, this man is calculating something else. What the household can afford, what the realistic options are if they can't. The dispensary provides for charity cases, he says. "Come tomorrow and ask for me." He picks up his bag. At the door he turns back. "Keep her off the floor and get that privy seen to." He glances around the court with a look that mixes professional concern with a kind of suppressed horror. "The conditions here," he stops. "Come to the dispensary tomorrow." He leaves. The entry water splashes as he goes. Mary is already at the bed, the bottle in her hand, counting drops into a cup. Outside, the rain keeps falling. Wednesday night is the longest night. Not because it's longer than other nights. The clock doesn't care about Nora's fever. It measures out its seconds and minutes the same as always, indifferent, mechanical, the way clocks are. But time has a way of changing texture when someone you care about is sick. When the usual rhythm of sleep and waking is replaced by a different rhythm. The pattern of a child's breathing, in and out, with that small papery sound at the end of each breath that you've decided means she's still breathing, and therefore nothing worse has happened. You and Paddy take turns sitting up. The arrangement is unspoken. You've lived in this room for 6 months and some things don't need saying. Paddy takes the first half, midnight to 3 or so, by the bells from the church on Eldon Street, and you take the second half. The children sleep in the bed with Mary wrapped around them. You sit on the upended bucket near the fire, which you've kept going all evening, burning through the coal more than you should, but not being able to bring yourself to let it go out while Nora's breathing has that sound. The fire is small, it barely reaches the corners of the room, but it's there, and it gives enough light to see by without the candle, which saves the candle. In the orange light, the room looks softer than it does by day. The cracks in the plaster become shadows. The water stains on the walls become part of the texture of things. The damp that's crept into everything over weeks of rain becomes just the smell of a place where people live. Nora's face above the blanket, flushed, hot when you press the back of your hand to her forehead. The drops from the brown bottle seem to have eased the worst of the coughing. She's sleeping, which is the main thing. She's sleeping and her chest is rising, and the papery sound at the end of each breath is still there, but no worse than it was. You feed the fire. The coal is damp. Everything in the room is damp. Everything in the building is damp. The stone has absorbed the week's rain into itself so thoroughly that it'll take days of warmth to drive it out. And the damp coal hisses and spits before it catches. The smell of it is almost comforting. Coal smoke and hot iron and the faint sweetness of the pine kindling underneath. The smell of fire. The smell of warmth being made in a cold place. You listen to the city outside. Liverpool at 2 a.m. sounds different from Liverpool at any other time, but doesn't sound like nothing. The docks never sleep. There are ships arriving and ships departing at all hours, and the sound of that, even through walls and across the distance, reaches you. The groan of chains, the far-off clang of iron on iron. Somewhere a horse is pulling something heavy up a wet street, its hooves loud and uneven on the cobbles, the driver silent. A dog somewhere, persistent and distant. The rain, always the rain, steady as breathing. And inside, Nora's breathing, the hiss of the fire, the small sounds of 4 other people sleeping. You think about the doctor, Dr. Chambers, from the dispensary on Eldon Street. The way he looked at the court, not with contempt exactly, with something more complicated. Professional horror, you thought at the time. The expression of a man who knows what the conditions he's looking at will produce in terms of outcomes, who knows the arithmetic of dampness and insufficient food and inadequate sanitation and what it does to children under 5. The Liverpool medical inspectors have been filing reports about courts like Jordan's Court since before you were born. You know this not because you've read the reports. They're not written for people like you, but because Connolly mentioned it once standing in the dock, that there had been some meeting of the council about the slum courts, some report, some proposal. The proposal was that something should be done. Something has not been done. Or rather, something is being done, slowly, in the way that official things move. Streets are being cleared on the Scotland Road end of the district, old courts being knocked down, new streets being cut through. The clearances began 5 years ago and will continue for 10 more years at least, everybody knows. And the people in the courts being cleared, where do they go? Into other courts, other rooms, packing in more tightly, paying more rent because supply has contracted and demand has not. Progress, they call it. You put another piece of coal on the fire. Nora shifts in her sleep. Her arm comes out from under the blanket and you tuck it back without waking her. That's most of what you can do. Keep her warm. Keep her off the floor. Give her the 3 drops twice a day. Go to the dispensary tomorrow. The fire crackles. The rain ticks on the board in the window. The Eldon Street church bell rings 3. Paddy comes and taps your shoulder, and you move from the bucket to the mattress, and sleep comes without ceremony. Thursday is a hospital day and a hunger day, and a strange suspended day, where the rain finally, quietly begins to relent. You go to the dispensary on Eldon Street first thing. Dr. Chambers is there, already seeing patients, in a room that's barely larger than Jordan's Court's main room, but serves as both waiting area and consultation space. The waiting area has 8 people in it when you arrive, and by the time you leave it has 14. A woman with a baby who has the same papery breathing as Nora. A man missing 2 fingers on his right hand, the stumps wrapped in cloth that was white when it started. An old man with a cough that sounds geological. Dr. Chambers takes more time with you than you expected. He asks about the room, the floor, the water situation. He writes in a notebook with quick, small handwriting that you can't read upside down. He asks about what Nora has eaten in the last 2 days, and you tell him, and he doesn't say anything specific about his reaction to the answer, but he writes something down. He gives you more of the brown tincture. He gives you a packet of something, a powder to dissolve in water, slightly sweet, to help with the fever heat. He writes a note in another, smaller book and tears it out and hands it to you. Take that to the parish relieving officer on Duke Street, he says. They have a fund for fuel and food in cases involving sick children. It's not much, but it's something. You look at the note. Will they? You start. Show it and ask for Milligan, he says. Tell him I sent you. He's reasonable. He pauses, hands you one more thing, a small card with his name on it. If the breathing worsens or she develops a rash, come directly, day or night. He means it. You can hear it in his voice. Not charity performed for an audience, but the specific, direct intention of a man who has decided that the children in courts like Jordan's Court are going to get the same instruction as the children in the terraced houses off Everton Road, and that this is simply how it is. You thank him. Outside on Eldon Street the rain is lighter. Not stopped, but lighter. The sky above the roof lines is still the same uniform grey, but there's a brightness to it now that there wasn't on Monday. A hint of differentiation in the cloud layers, the suggestion that above all this grey there is still a sun. You go to Duke Street. The relieving officer's office is a room in a municipal building that smells of wet paper and gaslight. A clerk takes the note, looks at you, and tells you to wait. You sit on a bench and wait for 40 minutes. 2 other men on the bench, one of them is asleep. The other has his hands clasped in his lap and is staring at the floor with the expression of someone doing complex internal mathematics. A man named Milligan comes out eventually. Heavy-set, side whiskers, a coat with a small grease stain on the right lapel that he seems unaware of. He reads the doctor's note. He looks at you with eyes that assess quickly and file away. How many children? 3. The sick one is 4. Employment? Dock labourer. Casual, he writes. He asks about the room, the rent, the family's weekly income in a good week versus a bad week. You answer accurately. There's no point in embellishment in either direction. You don't want to seem worse off than you are because that triggers a different conversation involving the workhouse. And you don't want to seem better off than you are because then he'll write in his book that you don't qualify. You tell him the truth. A week with full work. Perhaps 15 shillings between you and Paddy. A week without. Whatever can be raised. He nods. He writes a ticket. A coal order for 200 weight. Redeemable at the Merchant on Great Howard Street. A food order for bread and milk, redeemable at 3 bakers' shops, totalling perhaps 4 shillings worth of goods. Not much. He said not much, and he was right. But 4 shillings is 4 shillings, and coal and milk and bread are coal and milk and bread. The court, he says, when you're putting the tickets away. Jordan's Court on Vauxhall? Yes, it's scheduled. He says it carefully as if the word means something specific. Scheduled for what? Clearance, in the next few years. He looks at you with the expression of a man delivering information that is neither good news nor bad news, but is simply the shape of things. The whole block, probably. New road going through. You look at him. Where do people go? He has the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. There are rooms to let on Sylvester Street, and the new model dwellings they're building on Great Homer Street. Those should be taking applications by next year. Model dwellings. You've heard of these. 5-storey buildings with small separate rooms, indoor water closets on each landing, proper drainage. Rents that are affordable to a working man. designed by people who have thought about what a working man's room should contain. Thank you, you say. And that's what clearance means in practice. The old court comes down, the new road goes through, and the people from the court go. Somewhere. Somewhere that exists or doesn't yet exist. Somewhere that might be better or might simply be different. Somewhere that is not yet home, which means the process of making it home starts again. You walk back to Vauxhall with the coal order and the food tickets in your pocket. Nora is better by Thursday evening. Better is relative. She's still feverish, still has the cough, still sounds like someone breathing through paper. But she's awake, which she wasn't in the morning. She's sitting up in the bed with a cup of the sweetened water from Dr. Chambers' powder, drinking it in small sips with the focused attention of someone who has been persuaded that drinking is important. She looks at you when you come in and says, "My chest hurts." "I know," you say, "like there's something sitting on it." The doctor says that'll go. When? You sit down on the end of the bed. The coal from the order is already on the fire. You got it on the way back. Paddy collected it while you were at Duke Street, and the room is warmer than it's been since Sunday. Properly warm, the kind of warmth that reaches the walls. Few more days, you say, maybe a week. Nora considers this with the seriousness of a 4-year-old processing information about time, which is not her strongest subject. Is a week long? Not very. She looks at the fire. The firelight on her face is better than the pallor of the morning, still flushed, but the eyes are clearer. The floor was wet, she says. I know, it's not anymore. Why was it wet? Because of all the rain. She thinks about this. Will it be wet again? Maybe, you say, because you're not going to lie to her. But we'll sort it if it is. She seems to accept this. She leans back against Mary's arm and looks at the fire and drinks her sweetened water. Outside, for the first time since Sunday, the rain has genuinely stopped. Not just paused, stopped. There are breaks in the cloud visible from the window, actual darkness beyond the cloud, actual sky, and in the breaks between clouds a handful of stars, cold and small and very distant above the orange blur of the gas lamps on Vauxhall Road. Liverpool at night, with its gas lamps and its ship's lights and its 1,000 fires in its 1,000 courts, glows. Not beautifully, but it glows. Like something smouldering. Like a city that has been on fire for so long it's become the fire. You watch the stars through the break in the clouds until the clouds close again. Friday is a good day. This is not guaranteed. Friday being good requires a ship to be in, and a foreman to pick you in your hands to hold up through a full shift, and the weather to cooperate enough that the dock work doesn't get suspended, which it sometimes does in heavy weather when the cranes can't operate and the loading masters decide the risk isn't worth it. All of these things align on Friday. The ship is the SS Empress of India, a screw steamer out of Calcutta via the Suez Canal, 14 weeks out, carrying tea and jute and spices in her hold. Tea is a good cargo for dock workers because it's light, heavy by volume but not by individual crate, not like cotton bales or grain, and the work is fast and rhythmic without being punishing. The spices are something else. You smell it before the hatches are open. Something coming up out of the hold as the covers are uncrewed, something warm and dry and complex, something that doesn't belong in a Liverpool October and hits your nose with the specific force of a smell that comes from somewhere very different. Cardamom, pepper, something else you can't name but that makes your sinuses prickle and your eyes water slightly. The hold of a ship that's been to India smells like nothing else on earth. Nothing else you've smelled anyway. You work the tea, crate after crate, each one stamped with a shipper's mark and a code that tells the warehouse keeper where it should go and what it contains. Darjeeling, Assam, Ceylon. Names of places you know only as words on crates, that exist for you purely as labels on what's inside, as the dried, slightly musty smell of pressed tea leaves, as the particular satisfying lightness of a crate you can carry one-handed if necessary. Connolly is working the tea today too, and Davies, the Welshman, who caught a token at Flannery's gate this morning and is working with the focused relief of a man who's had a lean week and needs this to go well. "How's the child?" Connolly asks during the break. "Better, a bit better. My mare had it last winter," he says. "The chest thing. Cough for 3 weeks, and then one morning she was fine. Just fine. Like it never happened." "How old is she?" 7 now. He says it with the particular satisfaction of a parent whose child has survived the particular arithmetic of childhood illness in a city like Liverpool. A satisfaction that contains within it the knowledge of how many don't. The infant mortality in this city. You know the number, because Dr. Chambers mentioned it in passing without making a speech about it. Just mentioned it the way you'd mention the weather. 1 in 5 children in the slum districts of Liverpool does not make it their 5th birthday. The causes listed in the reports: fever, diarrhea, malnutrition, respiratory diseases. The actual cause, the one that sits underneath all the others, the conditions, the courts, the water, the damp, the insufficient food, the overworked mothers, the absent fathers, the impossible arithmetic of trying to keep children alive on 12 shillings a week in a room with no drainage. Nora is 4 years old. Nora is going to be fine. You've decided this. You pick up another crate of Assam tea. Pay comes at 5 o'clock Friday. The dockmaster's office at the south gate. A wooden shed with a window, a clerk inside, a ledger. Your name in the ledger, the hours worked, the rate applied, the total. The clerk counts it out without looking up. Coins on the wooden counter. You count it yourself. This is not distrust. It's just what you do. Everyone does. Because mistakes happen. Because the arithmetic matters too much not to verify. 2 shillings and 4pence for Friday. 2 shillings and 4pence for Tuesday's cotton work. That's 4 shillings and 8pence for 2 days this week. On a fully employed week with 6 days' work, a dock labourer can earn 14 or 15 shillings. This week you've had 2 days, which means 4 shillings and 8pence, minus whatever you've spent on bread and dripping and coal and the pawnbroker and the various other necessities that have come out of the pocket of the 2 shillings and 3pence from the watch. You stand in the rain, lighter now, more of a mist, outside the dockmaster's shed and do the arithmetic. You're short. You're almost always short. Short is the standard condition, the baseline from which you're always trying to move upward through work, and the work is always inconsistent enough that you can't build the distance you need. But you're short by less than you were on Monday. That's the week. Measured out in that unit, less short than Monday. Connolly is beside you, doing the same arithmetic with his own coins. Drink, he says. Not as an invitation exactly. More as a question about whether the week has earned it. You think of Mary and Nora and the coal on the fire and the food tickets from the dispensary. You think of the coins in your hand, each one necessary, each one allocated before it's even been earned. 1, you say. 1 costs 2pence. 2pence out of 4 shillings and 8pence. The arithmetic accepts it. The pub on Vauxhall Road is called the Anchor. Not because it has a nautical theme. Well, it does. There is an anchor painted on the sign outside, but so does every third pub within half a mile of the docks. But because it has been here so long, it might as well be anchored. The building is 200 years old if it's a day. The ceiling's so low that Connolly has to angle himself slightly to avoid the beam above the bar. The floor flagged in stone worn concave by generations of boots. The smell, beer and tobacco, and the particular combination of bodies and fire that is the smell of every tavern in Liverpool in October. Dense and warm after the wet street. The kind of warmth that hits you when you open the door and makes your cold face sting slightly. It's full. Friday evening, after pay, it's always full. This is where the money goes. Some of it. The portion that the women haven't managed to collect at the gate. The portion that doesn't make it home. Not always from irresponsibility. Sometimes from the particular need that a working man has, after a week of cold and physical strain, for 20 minutes of sitting somewhere warm with something in his hand. That's what you understand now, being here. You didn't when you first arrived in Liverpool. You thought, drink is the enemy. Drink is why the courts stay courts. Drink is the hole the money falls into. You thought this because it was what the temperance tract said. The ones handed out sometimes at the chapel. The ones with the pictures of the dissolute husband and the weeping wife. The temperance tracts are not wrong exactly. The drinking is a problem. You've seen the problem. The gin shops. The men who drink their wages before they get home. The families waiting. But standing in the anchor on a Friday evening with Connolly, with the warmth of the beer spreading down through your sternum and the feeling slowly returning to your feet, the feet that have been wet since Wednesday morning, you understand that this isn't simply moral failure. It's something else. It's the cheapest warmth available. It's the only place within walking distance that's just warm and bright and full of people who aren't sick or in debt or thinking about the privy. It's 2 hours out of a week that contain almost no hours that are simply yours. What'll you do, Connolly says, when the court gets cleared? You look at him. You heard about that. Everyone knows. He wraps both hands round his mug. The whole of Vauxhall north of Leeds Street is going eventually. The clearances has been going on since '69. Jordan's Court is just next in line. The man at the relieving office said 2 years maybe. Could be sooner. He drinks. I was in a court on Paul Street when the clearances came there. 71. We had a week's notice and then the town contractor's men turned up with picks. A week. He sets down his mug. The new buildings they're putting up on Homer Street are all right, mind. I looked at them. Small rooms but dry. Proper stairs. Water on each landing. The rent? 4 shillings a week. Which is more than you're paying now. Which is more than most people in the courts are paying now. Which is why the new buildings stay half empty sometimes. The people who need them most can't afford them, so they pack further into the remaining courts instead. But Connolly says this without bitterness, just as information, as the shape of things. Davies is thinking of going to Manchester, he says. There's factory work there. Steady hours, steady wages. Not as much as a good week on the docks, but it doesn't have bad weeks. The same way. You've thought about it? Thought about it. He considers his beer. My wife has family here. Her sister, her mother. You can't just uproot that, and the boys are settled in the school. You move them, you start that again. He shakes his head. I know Liverpool. I know which gates, I know which foremen. I know where to go when Flannery's is slow. That knowledge is worth something. It is. You know this too. You've been here 6 months, and your knowledge is already worth something. You'd be more likely to eat next week than you were in May. In another year, it'll be worth more still. Buy another, you ask. No, he says, standing up. My wife will have supper on. He pulls on his coat. Buttons it slowly, the way a man does when he's not quite ready to go back to the responsibilities waiting for him. Southgate, Monday, he says. Monday, you agree. He goes. You sit for another 10 minutes in the warmth, nursing the last of your beer, watching the room. A group of Irish dockmen in the corner are singing something quietly, a song you don't know, in Irish. Near the bar, 2 men are arguing about something to do with a cart and a right of way. A boy, maybe 12, is collecting empty mugs for the barman, working his way around the tables with the efficiency of a child who has been doing this a while. The fire in the grate crackles. The gas lamp on the wall hisses its constant domestic hiss. Outside, Liverpool, the docks, the Mersey, high and fast after the week's rain, carrying everything the city doesn't want to the sea. You drink the last of your beer and walk home. Saturday brings the sun. Not warmth exactly. It's October, and the sun in October over Liverpool is a cold, slanted thing that gives light without giving much heat. But after 5 days of rain, it lands on you like a gift. You feel it first through the window. The light in the room is different when you wake. Brighter, sharper, casting an actual shadow from the window frame across the floor. A real shadow. With the cloud that's been parked over the city all week, there haven't been shadows, just gradients of grey. You lie there for a moment and let it fall on your face, then you get up. The court outside is transformed, wet still. The flags won't dry for days, there's too much water in the stone, but the standing puddles have drained overnight as the street drain must have cleared, and the court surface is visible, the actual grey-brown stone, without the film of water. The privy corner is still best avoided, but the active overflow seems to have stopped. The children are already out. Nora is out. She's standing near the pump with her coat on, watching the older Callahan children do something with a piece of rope. She looks pale, still coughing occasionally, but she's upright and her eyes are tracking things, and she's interested in what the rope is doing. This is the best thing you've seen all week. You stand in the doorway and watch her for a moment. Then Paddy is beside you with 2 cups of tea. Actual hot tea, the twist of leaves from Monday stretched as far as it can go. And you take yours and drink it in the sunlight on the step. Better, Paddy says, meaning the court, meaning Nora, meaning the day. Better, you agree. It's old Bridget who suggests the hill. She says it the way she says most things. Not as a suggestion exactly, more as information placed in front of you and left to find its own utility. When I first came, she says, when I first came to Liverpool, 1847, I was living in a court worse than this one over on Fontenoy Street, and after the first terrible weeks, a woman in the court took me up Everton Hill, said, "You need to see the whole of it. You need to see what you've come to. It helps." She's quiet for a moment. Did it help, you ask? I didn't understand what I was looking at, she says. I'd never seen a city. I'd never been further from home than the next townland. I stood on that hill and looked at Liverpool and thought, God in heaven, what is this place? She smooths her black skirt. But yes, it helped. You need to see the shape of things sometimes, from outside. You have nowhere to be today. No gate to stand at on Saturday until the afternoon shift, which you may or may not get. Mary is at the wash house. Paddy is doing something about the loose board in the floor that's been loose since the flood. Nora is stable. The court is not a lake. You go to Everton Hill. The climb is longer than you expected. Everton is northeast of Vauxhall, up through streets that get progressively better as you climb. Not immediately better, not dramatically better, but the courts thin out as the ground rises, replaced by terraced houses with small front steps, then slightly wider terraced houses, then streets wide enough for 2 carriages to pass. Liverpool is a hill city, which people who know it only from the water don't always realise. The dock front is flat, deliberately, necessarily flat, because ships and their cargoes need flat ground. But the city rises behind the docks. It rises quite steeply in places, and the neighbourhoods on the slopes are sorted by elevation, the way sediment in water sorts by density. The heaviest things, the poorest, the most numerous, settling to the lowest levels near the water, the lighter things rising as you go up, until at the top of the slopes you find the terraces and villas of people who have enough money to pay for the view. Everton Village sits on the ridge, older than Liverpool in some ways. It was a village before Liverpool was a city, sits above the plain looking down at what the plain became. The reservoir is up here, the tower that holds the water supply for the city below, an actual Gothic tower, castellated at the top, absurdly medieval looking for a piece of municipal waterworks infrastructure. They built it in the 1850s and gave it battlements, as if the water commissioners wanted to suggest that clean water was something worth defending, which perhaps it is. You pass the tower and continue to the brow of the hill. And then you stop, because the view from Everton Hill on a clear October morning, after a week of rain, after 5 days of seeing Liverpool from inside a 12-foot by 10-foot room in a flooded court, is something that needs a moment to take in. The city spreads below you and runs to the water. All of it. The full extent of it. From the docks at the south end running north to Bootle, where the chemical works put their smoke into the sky. The Mersey cuts through the middle of the view, wide and silver-brown in the morning light, running fast with the week's rain. Ships moving on it in both directions. Dozens of ships, their wakes cutting white lines across the river. The dock warehouses along the waterfront, massive brick built to last forever, built to hold the goods of empire. The Albert Dock completed 30 years ago, its colonnaded warehouses reflected in the dock water. The Custom House further south, its dome visible above the surrounding buildings. The towers of the churches scattered through the city. St. George's, St. Nicholas at the pierhead, more of them than you can count, their spires and towers punctuating the skyline. And behind all of it, rising from the ridge opposite, the unfinished mass of the new cathedral. Not the Catholic cathedral, that's not built yet and won't be for decades. The Anglican one, a temporary wooden structure where the stone foundations are being laid, where they've been working for 10 years and will work for 50 more, building something enormous enough to last 1,000 years, building it slowly, the way things that last that long have to be built. The smoke from 1,000 chimneys rises into the cold, clear air and drifts south with the wind, a brown-grey layer that sits like a veil above the city at about 300 feet. Above it, the sky is pale blue. Below it, Liverpool breathes its coal smoke and keeps working. You can see Jordan's Court from here, or rather, you can see the block of buildings that contains Jordan's Court. You can't see the court itself. It's hidden inside the block, invisible from outside, which is sort of the point of courts. They exist in the spaces that the city doesn't show. but you know where it is. You know the chimney stack of the building on the street-facing side, the one that's slightly lower than its neighbour, and from that you can locate roughly where the entry is, and from the entry roughly where the court itself sits. 400,000 people in this city, and perhaps a third of them in rooms like yours. The Liverpool that visitors see, the visitors who write articles about it, who draw engravings of it, who admire the grandeur of its new public buildings and its classical civic architecture. That city is the layer above the smoke. The merchants' offices on Dale Street, the chambers of commerce, the fine houses on Abercrombie Square where the cotton brokers live with their gardens and their servants. Underneath all of that, the courts, underneath the grandeur, the pump that doesn't work and the privy that overflows and the mattress on the floor and the arithmetic of 2 shillings and 3pence from a grandfather's broken watch. You stand there for a long time. The wind on the hill is clean, genuinely clean, this high up, this far from the courts and the chemical works. It smells of cold and damp earth, and very faintly of the sea beyond the river. You breathe it in. The feeling that goes through you is hard to name. It's not quite despair, and not quite hope, and not quite anger. It's something more like clarity, like the view from a height always gives you, the sense of the actual shape of things, stripped of the fog of living inside them. That shape is complicated. The city that gave you 2 days' work out of 5, that flooded your floor and gave your housemate's child a chest fever, and takes a man's grandfather's watch for 2 shillings and 3pence, that hangs its poorest tenants in crumbling courts, waiting for a clearance that will disperse them further into other courts, and also the city that put a doctor in a dispensary who gives medicine and asks nothing, that has a man named Milligan who writes coal orders for sick children, that builds hospitals and mechanics institutes and public libraries and schools, that employs 100,000 people on its docks and in its warehouses and factories, and in all the trades and skills and services that a great port city requires to function. Both of these cities exist simultaneously and are the same city, and you live in both of them all the time. Below you Liverpool makes its smoke and moves its goods and buries its dead and raises its children and does all the things cities do ceaselessly without comment. A seagull comes past at almost exactly your eye level, heading for the river on a long diagonal, riding something in the air, barely moving its wings. It doesn't look at you. You watch it until it's out of sight over the rooftops. Then you turn and start back down the hill. There is a woman sitting on the church steps on Everton Road on the way back, not in distress, just sitting. She's perhaps 60, perhaps more, with a face weathered in the way that faces get when they've spent decades in outdoor work or walking between outdoor things. She has a basket on her lap. She's eating an orange. You've never seen anyone eat an orange in the street before. Oranges are 6pence each. Not impossibly expensive, but expensive enough that eating one casually, sitting on a church step, is a statement of a kind. She sees you looking. She doesn't stop eating. There's a cart on Netherfield Road, she says. Spanish oranges, 6pence for 3. 6pence for 3 is better than 6pence for 1. Everything's better in bulk, she says. That's the whole of commerce, isn't it? She peels another segment. You're coming from the hill. I am. Good view today. It is. She chews the orange segment thoughtfully. The smell of it reaches you. Bright and sharp and entirely out of place in an October street in Liverpool. I came up here in the famine, she says. 1848. From Sligo. There were so many of us they had the sheds along the dock. Fever sheds, they called them. Hundreds in the sheds. She says this without drama, the way you state a fact you've told before. I walked to Everton Hill the first week I was here. Before I had a room. Before I had anything. Just walked up here and looked. What did you see? She considers. Ships, she says. A lot of ships. And I thought, one of those ships just brought me here, and another one could take me further. She finishes the orange, folds the peel neatly and puts it in the basket. I never went. Stayed here instead. Married a man from Mayo. Buried him 10 years ago. My daughter's in New York. She stands up, picks up the basket. Netherfield Road, she says, 6pence for 3. She walks off down the hill. You walk back to Jordan's Court. The months move through you and around you, not all at once. You live them one day at a time, which is the only speed available. But looking back later, you'll see them in compressed form, the way a sequence of long, individual days can be remembered as a single motion. October gives way to November. The rain stops eventually as rain does. The weather turns proper cold, the dry, cold of December, the kind that turns the cobblestones white in the mornings with frost, the kind that your breath steams in from the moment you open the door. You learn that this is better than the wet cold. Dry cold is predictable. You add another layer, you keep moving, and the cold is something you push through. Wet cold gets into everything. Dry cold sits on the surface of things and waits. The court in December, frost is quiet in a way it isn't in the rain. The children play differently, more bundled, less reckless, their games tighter and faster. The pump runs clear and cold. Your hands crack worse than ever, the skin splitting along the knuckles every cold morning, and you rub tallow into them each night from the block that Paddy keeps on the shelf, and this helps some. Nora recovers. She recovers fully, which is, you think this carefully, which is the best thing that happens in the autumn of 1873. She's running across the court by November, chasing the Callahan children, shrieking about something, her breath steaming in the cold. The papery sound in her breathing is gone. Dr. Chambers, when you stop by the dispensary to tell him, nods with the satisfaction of a man who is given mostly bad news and receives good news with appropriate pleasure. Keep her off cold floors in wet weather, he says. We'll try, you say. He looks at you over his spectacles. Something about the way you say it, the honesty of try as opposed to will, makes him set down his pen. The conditions in that court, he says. I filed with the inspector. Several people have filed with the inspector. This time there may be some movement, he says this carefully. There's a new medical officer of health, Dr. Trench. He's been through the Vauxhall courts himself, personally. He's preparing a report for the council. You've heard about reports for the council. The clearance is coming anyway, you say. The relieving officer told me. New road through the block. Yes, he nods. That may accelerate things. He picks up his pen again. Where will you go? You think about this. It's a question you've been thinking about in the background since the relieving officer mentioned it in October. Where will you go? The model dwellings on Homer Street. Rooms somewhere. Another court which would be a step in the wrong direction. Or, and this thought has been there too in the background, somewhere else entirely. I'm not sure yet, you say. He nods, writes something in his book. Whatever you decide, he says, get off that floor before next winter. Winter. Specifically, the particular cruelty of January. January in Liverpool is the month when the city seems to have decided to compress all of its unpleasantness into the shortest possible time. The days are barely 8 hours long. The cold comes in hard from the east in some years, from the Irish Sea in others, and either way it finds you. The work at the docks slows. Ships are still arriving and departing, but winter storms delay them. And delayed ships mean delayed cargoes mean days when the gates open, and the foreman picks nobody, just shakes his head and goes back inside. You have 3 blank days in January, 3 days of no work, no pay, sitting in the room with the cold coming through the walls and the coal budget stretched to almost nothing, the bread from the baker's going stale before you've finished it, because you're buying it less frequently to make the money last. On the 2nd blank day, you go to the reading room. The Liverpool Mechanics Institute on Mount Street has a reading room that is free to enter, warm and full of newspapers and periodicals. You've been there twice before, briefly. Today you stay for 3 hours. The reading room is a different world from Jordan's Court in a specific disorienting way. The quiet of it. Not silence. People turn pages, occasionally cough, a coal falls in the grate. But the kind of quiet that means everyone in the room has individually decided to be quiet, which creates a collective silence that feels almost deliberate, almost curated. The men in the reading room are mostly like you in the general outline, working men of various trades taking advantage of a free warm space and free access to information. A few better dressed men, clerks perhaps, who use the room as an extension of their professional life. You read a newspaper, 3 newspapers in fact, because they're there and they're free and you have time. You read the Liverpool Daily Post and the Liverpool Mercury and a weekly illustrated paper from London that has engravings of things, machinery, buildings, disasters at sea, that you look at with more attention than the text. There is an article in the Mercury about the sanitary conditions of the Liverpool slum courts. It quotes a report by the new medical officer of health. It quotes specific courts by name. Jordan's Court is not named, but courts very like it are described in detail. The overcrowding, the inadequate water supply, the failing drainage, the mortality rates. The mortality rate in the worst courts of Liverpool is more than twice the rate in the better streets. More than twice. You sit with that for a moment. The article goes on to describe what the council proposes to do about this. The language is official and measured and covers a lot of ground without quite committing to anything specific, but the general direction is clear. More clearances, more model dwellings, more regulation of court conditions, stricter enforcement of sanitary laws. Progress. The real kind this time. Maybe you read it 3 times. Outside the reading room windows, January does its worst. Inside, the fire burns, and the newspaper in your hands is warm from the reading room's warmth, and for 3 hours you're dry and warm and reading about the world from a place that is part of it. That's something. You fold the newspaper carefully and put it back on the rack for the next reader and walk back out into the January cold. Spring comes in March like an argument. Warm days followed by cold days, as if the calendar and the weather are disagreeing about when exactly spring is supposed to start. The mornings are still cold enough for breath to steam. The afternoons are sometimes startlingly warm enough to take your coat off for an hour, and then the warmth evaporates and the coat goes back on before you realise how cold you are again. The court changes in spring. Not permanently, not structurally. The stones are the same stones, the buildings are the same damp brick. But the quality of the air changes. Something lightens. The angle of the sun, coming over the rooftops differently now, reaching lower into the court, begins to find the stones in the morning, and the stones hold the warmth for an hour or two before the shadow crosses them again. The children are out earlier. Old Bridget is in her doorway from first light. Mrs. Kearney sweeps the court steps with something that might be enthusiasm. You notice one morning that there's a plant growing in a crack between two flagstones near the pump. A weed, technically, the kind that finds any purchase in stone and takes it, but it has 3 small leaves, and it's unmistakably alive and green, which in Jordan's court in March is a statement. Nobody pulls it up. You work more. Spring ships. The cotton routes from America are busy in spring and summer when the Atlantic crossing is easier and the mills in Lancashire want their raw material. Coal comes through from Wales. General cargo from the continent. You're at the gates most mornings now and getting picked most mornings, which builds your reputation, which is, Connolly has explained, the actual capital you're accumulating here. Not money, not savings, because there are no savings. Everything gets spent, and the question is only what it gets spent on. The capital is knowledge, reputation, the foreman's familiarity with your face and their willingness to pick it. You get to know Regan, the foreman at Flannery's Gate, in the way you get to know people who have power over you. Carefully, observantly, never overstepping but being present enough to be recognised. Regan picks you 3 days in a row in April. On the 3rd day he says nothing specific, but at the end of the shift he hands you a chit rather than cash. A chit that means come back Monday, which means you're in the regular rotation rather than the casual crowd. Regular rotation is not a guaranteed wage. Nothing is a guaranteed wage on the docks, but it means you're in the pool of men who get picked first before the casual crowd even forms, and that is a different kind of precarious from the kind you've been living in. You bring home 14 shillings in the last week of April. 14 shillings in a week. Mary counts it twice on the table and then looks up at you and says nothing, but the look says enough. By summer, you know things about Liverpool that you didn't know in October. You know which way the wind needs to blow for the Mersey to smell acceptable. You know which bakery on Eldon Street marks down the end-of-day bread by 4p rather than 2p, and what time you have to get there to get it. You know that the reading room at the Mechanics' Institute is coldest on Tuesdays for some reason. You know that the foreman at the North Dock, whose name is Henderson, doesn't like men who arrive at the gate looking uncertain, and that a particular uprightness of posture and direct eye contact is worth at least a 50-50 chance of getting picked by him. You know the court. You know it in the way you know something you live in, not by observation but by body memory. The slightly uneven flagstone near the entry that wants to catch your foot in the dark. The exact force required to get the pump going on a cold morning. The particular creak of the second stair, the one that Paddy calls the warning creak because it tells you when someone's coming. The way sound travels in the court. How a conversation at the pump can be heard clearly from a first-floor window because of the way the walls angle. Bridget's light in the window, the smell of the Mersey at low tide, the foghorn of a ship coming in through river mist at 4 a.m, that low, sustained sound that you've stopped waking to, and now only know later that you heard it. These things are yours. You didn't choose them. They're accumulated. The clearance notice comes in July. Not a formal notice exactly. A man from the town clerk's office walks through the area posting bills on walls, and one of them goes up on the building at the mouth of the entry to Jordan's Court. Notice of compulsory acquisition. The language of it is formal and dry, and essentially says, The council is purchasing these properties for the purpose of road widening and improvement. Occupants are to vacate by October 1st. October 1st. That's 3 months. Paddy reads the notice twice, and then goes back into the court and sits on the step and stares at the middle distance for a long time. Mary reads it and says nothing. The Callahans read it. Old Bridget reads it, or rather she listens while Mrs. Kearney reads it to her, because Bridget's eyes aren't good enough anymore, and her expression doesn't change. 26 years, she says, not to anyone in particular. The Homer Street dwellings, you say. 4 shillings a week. I've been past them. They're good rooms. Bridget looks at you. Her expression is complicated. Something like patience. Something like sadness. Something like the specific weariness of someone who has been moved before. It's not about the rooms, she says. You understand after a moment. It's not about the rooms. It's about this. This specific court, this specific pump, these specific people and their specific positions relative to one another. The knowledge of who lives where, the Callahan children's feet on the stones, Mrs. Kearney's broom, the plant in the crack near the pump which has now grown to 3 inches tall. A room on Homer Street with a water closet on the landing might be better in every measurable way, and still not be this, still not be home. You know this now. You didn't in October, September, the last month of the court. You spend it partly in the ordinary way, work, gates, bread queue, coal order, and partly in the specific way of a person who knows something is ending, and is therefore more aware of it than they would otherwise be. You're more aware of the morning light on the wet flags than you were in the spring when it first came back. More aware of the sound of the pump, that 3-stroke stutter before the water runs, that you've heard every morning for a year. More aware of old Bridget in her doorway, and the Callahan children and Mrs. Kearney's broom. You spend an evening in mid-September sitting on the step outside the room in the warm dark after supper, after the children are in bed, after the court has gone quiet. The sky above the roof lines is that deep dark blue that September evenings get, clear enough for stars, with a half moon somewhere out of sight throwing just enough light to see by. Paddy comes out and sits beside you. He has his pipe, which he only smokes in the evenings, and the smell of it is something you'll associate with Jordan's Court for the rest of your life. That particular tobacco that costs a halfpenny a pinch from the tobacconist on Vauxhall Road, dark and slightly sweet. You don't talk for a while. Where'll you go? He asks. Homer Street, you say. I've put the application in. 2 rooms. I can afford 2 rooms now. He nods. 2 rooms. This is progress measured in the specific currency of this world. A room for sleeping in, and a room that isn't just for sleeping in. You'll come to Homer Street, you ask. Mary wants Sylvester Street. Her sister's on Sylvester Street. He draws on the pipe. It's 2 streets over. We'll see each other. You'll see each other, you agree. The court is quiet. Somewhere up on Vauxhall Road a cart goes by, the horse's hooves clear and sharp on the dry stone. Dry, because it's September, and September in Liverpool is the driest month. The month when the courts that have been wet since March finally get to be genuinely dry, when the stones lose the last of their stored moisture, and the rooms smell of old dust rather than old damp. You breathe it in. Coal smoke and the river and the pipe tobacco and something that's just stone, warmed by a year's worth of days, giving back a small fraction of what it's taken in. You're different than when you came, Paddy says. I know. You were very green. I know. You're still young. He looks at you sideways. But you're not green anymore. Not green, something else. Not the opposite of green. You're not hardened, not in the way some men get hardened, that particular closed quality that comes from a long time in difficult circumstances, but changed, shaped by the year the way the flagstones are shaped by the feet that have been walking them for decades, not by 1 foot or 1 year, but by the accumulation of all of it. I'm not going back, you say, not home, back, because home has become complicated. No, Paddy says, I didn't think you would. He smokes his pipe. The moon moves slightly. The court breathes its September air. You'll do well, he says. You already are. October first arrives, and the court empties. It doesn't empty all at once. People leave on different days in the last week of September and the first days of October. The Callahans go first to rooms on Eldon Street, the children carrying their bed frame between them like a boat. Mrs. Kearney goes to her daughter on Scotland Road. Old Bridget goes to... You're not entirely sure where Bridget goes. She says only that she has somewhere, and that it's all right, and she says it in the tone of a person who has been all right in places worse than wherever she's going. The last morning in the court you go out early. 6 o'clock, first light. The entry still in shadow, but the sky above the court brightening. The flagstones dry and grey and very still. You stand for a long time. The pump, the trough, the plant in the crack. It's gone to seed now. A small dried head of something white and feathery, waiting for wind. The privy in the corner, door standing open, silent. The windows of the empty rooms reflecting the sky. Your boots on the stones. You think of the link boy who doesn't exist in Liverpool 1873. There are lanterns here, gaslight on the main roads. And then you think, there is no single way to know a city. There is no proper beginning and no proper ending. There is only the sequence of days and what they do to you while you're living them. You think of Connolly saying, 4 years before the work stops telling your body about it. And the old woman on the church steps with her orange, and Dr. Chambers warming his hands before he touched a sick child. And old Bridget, 26 years in Liverpool, saying, it's not about the rooms. You pick up your bag. You walk through the entry for the last time. The wall where the clearance notice was posted is blank now. Just brick, slightly lighter where the paper was, a rectangle of slightly less weathered stone. Vauxhall Road in the morning. The gas lamp still on, competing with the first grey light. The smell of the river and the coal in the bakeries starting up. The sound of carts beginning. You turn north toward Homer Street. And now, here, in whatever room you're listening from, whatever warmth you've arranged around yourself, whatever dark you've settled into, the room in Jordan's court doesn't exist anymore. They cleared the block in November 1873 and cut the new road through in the spring of 1874, and now there's a street where the court was, a proper street with gas lamps and a sewer beneath it, and if you walked there today, you would have no way of knowing that for 30 years a court existed in the space behind those buildings, that 80 people shared one pump and one privy, that a 4-year-old girl lay in a flooded room with a chest fever and recovered, that a 17-year-old boy from somewhere else lay on a mattress and listened to the rain. No way of knowing except that the stones would know. Stones remember, not consciously, not in any way that can be used. But the ground holds what it holds, the deep cold record of what happened on it. Liverpool stones have been holding it since before there was a city on them. The memory of mud and water and salt and the centuries of everything that came after. And in every city that has ever grown on a river, in every century, in every courted alley and narrow place where people have been packed in together by the economics of necessity, the same rain has fallen, the same pumps has been worked, the same children have had the same fevers, the same men have stood at the same gates in the same rain waiting to be picked or not picked. The same calculations have been done with the same coins. The same mornings have arrived too early and demanded the same body from the same mattress. And the same thing has happened, which is people have survived them. More than survived. Made them into something. Made the courts into communities and the communities into histories and the histories into here, this night. This story, this moment when you're somewhere warm and dry, listening to a 17-year-old who is long gone, and his world that has been gone even longer. The body under your blanket, warm now, fed, safer tonight. The rain outside, if there is rain outside, let it fall. You've earned your rest. Let it come then. Let the day's weight settle. The way weight settles when you finally put something down that you've been carrying a long time. Let the ache in your hands ease. Let the cold in your feet work itself out slowly, degree by degree, as the blanket holds you. Let your thoughts quiet. They'll be back tomorrow. Everything will be back tomorrow. The calculations, the questions, the things that need doing and the things that can't be done and the things that are waiting patiently to be faced. Tomorrow will have all of that. But tonight, right now, in this moment between waking and not, there is just the dark and the quiet and the particular softness of a mind letting go of the day. You've done enough. You are warm enough, safe enough, here enough. Let that be sufficient. Let sleep do what sleep does. The oldest, most reliable thing. The thing that has been happening in every room in every city since there were rooms and cities. The thing that 17-year-old boys in flooded courts have always been grateful for at the end of hard days. The day that was is already past. The day that comes is not yet here. Between them, this, just this. Centuries will pass. Liverpool will be rebuilt and rebuilt again. The courts will go, the new streets will go, and new buildings will rise in their place, and people will live in them and not know what was underneath, not know what the stones know, but the rain will still fall on the Mersey. The river will still run fast after a wet week, brown and silver in the morning light. Ships will still come in from the sea with their holds full of somewhere else, carrying the smell of distances you'll never travel, carrying cardamom and cotton and the particular dry ghost of places that exist for you only as words on crates. And people will still get up before dawn. We'll still do what must be done. We'll still come home at the end of it and take off their boots, cold and damp, worse for wear, holding together, and lie down and be grateful for the lying down. Some things don't change. The need for rest doesn't change. So let it come. Let the sounds of wherever you are become the sounds of sleep. Let the light behind your eyelids fade to the particular dark that sleep brings. Not empty dark, but soft dark. The dark that holds things gently. You've done enough for today. The pump will be there tomorrow. The gate will open. The rain will do what the rain does, and you'll handle it. You always do. Good night.